Welcome back to Grace Abounds and our program on the opioid crisis and how's the church called to respond to this. Earlier in our series, we reviewed the history and origins of the crisis and some of the dimensions of the crisis. We explored those dimensions by speaking with law enforcement officers about their experience on the ground, encountering people who have problems with opioids or people who have had their lives negatively impacted in some way. We've also heard from members from recovery community organizations about the concept of recovery capital and about what it needs to start putting the pieces back together to reintegrate those who suffer from any kind of substance abuse back into the life of the community. We're happy today to have with us Cully Culluth, who is the executive director of an organization here in Sheboygan called Samaritan's Hand.
Correct. Samaritan's Hand, we're a faith-based drug and alcohol outpatient clinic. Mm-hmm. We have clinical substance abuse counselors licensed through the state. And on March 1st, we'll be going into our 7th year of existence, serving Sheboygan County and surrounding areas.
Now, obviously, you're faith-based, yes, but you are also providing clinical services in terms of rehabilitation counseling and rehabilitation services. Let's explore the angle of faith a little bit here. If I were to go to any kind of inpatient rehabilitation service, or if I was to work with an AODA counselor in a secular setting, they would have different ways they would intervene in my life and try to help me get better. What would be added onto that from your perspective in a faith-based organization?
Well, the faith-based standpoint for recovery is like off of a 12-step model where a lot of larger recovery communities and organizations use higher power or God of your understanding or some type of spirituality. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't all use that if it wasn't such a vital component to most people's recovery. We just take that the step further. Instead of them trying to figure out what spirituality, higher power of God of their understanding is, we use God out of the Bible, mm-hmm, and we base our program on Christian principles and the change of a lifestyle, which more secular counseling would do as well, but the lifestyle changes would basically be referenced on biblical principles.
So there's always a message of hope involved. I mean, all of us as Christians understand that we're fallen and need a Savior, but there is always God's mercy. There is always hope, no matter how many times we mess up. In your experience, is this a message that people with a substance abuse problem, specifically opioids, is this a message that people are used to hearing from churches, that there's hope, there's redemption, and it doesn't matter what their problem is?
No, and unfortunately not. I think a lot of the people that we deal with, they think that they're not good enough for churches. Mm-hmm. They think that they might be judged, or they've crossed the line of they've sinned too much, or they're not welcome at church. Mm-hmm. If any of them have any church experience at all, or maybe very little.
So if I was a user, I could sit there at some point and say, maybe I'm just a bad guy and people have given up on me and God's given up on me. What you're going to be saying to me is God never gives up on anybody, and there's hope always. If somebody's come from a church background, they're going to use some of the same language. What if somebody has no exposure to faith and you're the first exposure to faith they have? How are they going to encounter Jesus Christ as a Savior and as a message of hope when they're in a very dark place?
Well, we start out real basic, and one of the big things is that they're there, that they're still alive, and I ask them to explain that. And most of them have a hard time explaining why they're even asking for help, why they're alive, why other things. And then I said, that's because that's Jesus' love, grace, and mercy, mm-hmm, working in their life. And then we tell them about, like, our motto is hope for the hopeless and healing for the hurting. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of times they ask, well, why we care, because a lot of people have given up on them. And we tell them that we care for you, we love you because he first loved us. And we're going to walk through them. And or through their addiction with them and their recovery. And that's where our name for the organization came from, Samaritan's Hand, that these are strangers. They might be people that the community or even the church have walked away from, or if they've walked away from their families or the churches. And we're there to bridge that gap from the street and their addiction back into the church. We're like the emergency room. And then the churches are like the hospitals. We want to patch them up. We want to help them, get on their feet again. But the hospitals where they're going to get well. They're going to get their real, their real medicine when they start to attend the churches.
Okay, so how do these folks show up on your radar screen? Do they find you? Do you find them? Do churches send them to you? To a social service agency? How do they show up on your radar screen?
All the above. The law enforcement in Sheboygan County has been phenomenal. The Sheriff's Department, the Department of Corrections, the Detention Center, the Police Department, even the politicians, anybody that really in any authority position, they'll direct them towards us. Human Services, probation, parole, churches, any other social service points of even like any for child welfare, if the parents need, they're having problems, Child Protective Services. But we get referrals from anywhere and everywhere, and our community has really been great for accepting us. Even the people that don't really believe in the faith themselves, they've seen a lot of great transformations. They know that it's a good organization, and we're there to help people with the problem with their addictions and help the community. So they've really been open to referring to us.
How common is it, say I'm in jail, and I've been picked up either for some kind of offense related to my drug habit or just possession or something like that. And when I get out of jail, one of the things I might not have is a circle of friends. But how common is it that my friend might show up who can provide me more drug, that the dealer is actually going to know when I get out of jail and put me right back into his supply stream?
Yeah, we all know that, the supply and demand. And when your addiction is there, one of the best things that you said is when they get out of jail. Some people think that jail might be a negative thing. A lot of the clients that we work with, it's a positive thing, because a lot of times that it's kept them for some time between them and their drugs. And when they get out and they're clean and sober, at least sometimes they're thinking with a clear head. Of course, the dealers want to bring them back to their side, but if the other individuals want to change their life, they know where to go for that as well. Just like they know where to go for the drugs, they really know where to go for the recoveries too. They know that what the circles that people talk about and the people that have gotten out and where they've went as well. So there's that underground circle. But like you said, they're not let go easy, and they have to make a stand and make a decision on are these real friends that are trying to poison their lives and trying to bring them down and keep them addicted and basically making some type of profit off of their misery.
So again, I'm getting out of jail. I don't know anything about the Bible. I don't know anything about Jesus Christ. And by the grace of God, I end up on your radar screen. Describe to me what's going to happen when I get to Samaritan's Hand.
Like tonight, we will have a Bible study tonight. There's a women's support meeting and Bible study in Sheboygan on our 8th Street location, and there's a location in Plymouth where we'll be having a men's Bible study tonight as well. And somebody walks in off the street, I actually pick up guys in our van. Our organization has a van that somebody donated, and we pick them up, we take them out there, or if they just walk into one of our meetings, Bible studies, activities that go on at our place, the first thing they're probably going to get is a big hug or a handshake or a welcome. People are going to introduce themselves, and we know it's a very awkward moment. But what we even tell our clients, if it's a group setting and it's the first day of group, if it's the meetings that we're in or whatever, everybody was the new kid once, like at school. And to welcome that new kid, because we know that it's awkward. So they're the most important person in the room that day. And we make them feel that way. And they're met with, we give everybody a Bible. Everybody gets a Bible to take with them. They get a meeting list of all of our activities, which are every night of the week, that are open, and they're open for free to anybody in the community. And they'll get on the back of that. A lot of the guys where the males will write their names and phone numbers, and the females will write for the females their names or phone numbers, so that they automatically have a support system and a support list for rides, people to call. They have the meeting list, they have a Bible, and they've got a new safe place to go and some new friends right after they bridge that door.
Again, if I get out and I don't have a place to stay, I might find a network of safety. Well, let me back up here. We're talking about some things that work. Let's talk about some things that don't work. If we're a church and we have somebody who has a substance abuse problem in the church, or somebody who comes in off the street and gets on our radar screen, what would be some of the things that we really should avoid doing? What would not work?
Well, I think it's always good to be cautious. You can care for the individuals, but not to be sucked in, because a lot of the people that have these substance abuse problems might have some behavior that goes with that. Like maybe be careful bringing them into your home. A lot of people want to take them home and give them a safe place to live or something else. That could be dangerous. Borrowing them money, trying to get them out of problems, even giving them car rides or something. They could be going through somebody's purse, or if it's a male-female or a female-male situation, some of the guys, they could even be dangerous. There could be sexual advances on both sides. They just have to be very cautious with some of these people's behavior, because they're not thinking with the best thinking that they have, and that they've been used to some pretty poor behavior because of their situation.
So one of the things we definitely should do is have real clear boundaries, is what I'm hearing you say.
Correct.
But in terms of things that we can do proactively to actually help somebody, even if they are potentially a problem, where do we start?
Well, I think knowing. I think this is a great venue right here with education, that if the people are watching these things, to have the education of that there is a problem, but there's help out there for the people that need the help. And the other one is that churches, or maybe the individuals or whatever, that might not be prepared to help these individuals, at least they know where to send them. They know who can help them. Because not everybody has to know what to do, but if they know where to go for the people that know what to do, that's huge, to know where your resources are.
Okay, so if I have a church member or family member who I start saying, there's a problem here. There's some pattern of behavior that makes me think that there might be substance abuse involved. In the classical sort of AA model, we do an intervention and sit down and sit with the person and say, hey, we need to talk about your problem. Maybe not phrase it that way. Is that effective, or is there a better way to, if we see somebody who looks like they're having a problem, approach them and raise the issue?
I think there's a variety of ways. It depends where the person is with their addiction. Sometimes you really have to call them out on it if it's really affecting the family unit or safety of themselves or others. Some maybe yourself or someone else. If it's a church member or a family member or a coworker or an employee, you can pull them to the side and say, I think there might be a problem here. Do you want to talk about that? And then again, say, if you don't want to talk to us, will you talk to someone? And then refer them to someone, because they might not be comfortable or want to talk to a family member or even their congregation leadership because of shame. They might not want them to know what they're doing. So maybe an outside somebody that's neutral party, or in a professional sense that bound like us by confidentiality, we can't say anything that they tell us legally anyway. So they might be more comfortable. But whatever it is, any situation is to encourage the people to get help, no matter how you intervene. If it is an intervention, or if it's one-on-one, or if it's writing them up at work, or whatever it might be. But as long as it's done with caring. When people start to feel like they're judged, or people are ganging up on them, or they're getting, it's a negative action, the more positive you can make it, people want to know that you care for them, and it might be received much better.
Is it accurate to say that there is an opioid epidemic? I mean, we've seen a very large increase in the number of people who are using or dying. But what's your perception? Are we having a real change in behavior in society here? And if so, what do you think has brought this about?
Well, yes, to answer the question, yes, I believe there's a huge opioid epidemic. I think the change happened quite a few years ago, and I think if you refer back to I believe it's your first session, that the pharmaceuticals, and some doctors and some other prescribing things were a big part of it. Once the abuse potential came in, then I think it just got ramped up so fast because it was so readily available. And one of the things of people with substance abuse is they like to not feel, or they like to feel good. And that really makes a difference. And with the opioids, although there was always been types of abused drugs, illicit drugs, street drugs, or pharmaceutical drugs of different variations, the danger with the opioids is the real thing, is the overdose potential, the things that they're cut with, the addiction itself. It really manifests itself a lot faster. And then the physical manifestation is worse than a lot of other drugs that people might have been using illicitly as well.
Okay, so I'm going to run with your language there. We've referred to this elsewhere in this series. People either want to feel good or they don't want to feel. If we're dealing with opioids, that's more not want to feel, right?
Correct.
And have you seen a different pattern of that? I mean, we've talked earlier about how these drugs aren't discriminating by age or by socioeconomic status or by race. But is there a population that's gravitating more towards I don't want to feel than I want to feel good, and that's had an effect on the epidemic?
Yes, I think the younger the people, the younger is probably 18s to, 30, that they're the ones that don't want to feel. They're the ones that are really in the right now. They like the immediate right now. They like the effect that they can check out, that they're the euphoric feeling, the numbness, the disconnection from their problems, the world, the stress. And then in a lot of things, it's even almost been glorified in, rock music and other people, movie stars, famous people that have almost made like opioids, heroin, or whatever, that it was some kind of like a mystical or magic drug.
Can somebody recover on their own?
I'm sure, just like the guy that fell out of an airplane without a parachute, there has been somebody that's lived. But I would not recommend it. For one, it's going to be a lonely journey. And the second one is with a lot of other typical secular counseling, and even people themselves, they want to manage their behavior. And a lot of the people that say, well, I can quit, or my Uncle Charlie quit, or whatever else, it's behavior modification. And us, from a faith-based standpoint and from the church, the stand that they take is we need an inner transformation so that the outer transformation can take place. Because we can only behave so well for so long. We can only keep the balls in the air and juggle for so long. And that's the behavior modification. So if we're trying to act better or quit on our own, or for our circumstances or whatever else, sooner or later that usually gets exhausting, or we hit a spot where we can't manage it anymore. So that's where the faith-based, where the inner transformation, where when we can't anymore, Jesus can. And that's really where we get to keep going.
Well, I'd kind of like to end on that note, but I want to put you on the spot and ask you for, if you were just going to start with somebody walking in the room and quote the Bible to them, where would you start in quoting the Bible?
I guess I would just quote where we can love you because he first loved us.
Okay, that's a good place to stop for a church's response to the opioid epidemic, that we can love those who are sitting in dark places as a result of substance abuse because God first loved us. We are called as the church to incarnate Jesus' presence in the world. Stay with us as we move on in this series to talk to some people from the medical and psychological community about their levels of intervention and their success stories with those who are sitting in dark places. And may the light of God shine in your lives at all times. God bless.